screen, please?
We can.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm super excited to be able to take you through the advancements and enhancements that we've made in helping customers migrate email data to the cloud. Before we get into that, though, I thought we could all get started with a bit of a trivia question. Now, I'd like to ask you to please post your answers if you want to participate and have a bit of fun with us in the question or chat section, which should be down the bottom right of your screen, if I'm not wrong. And the question I've got to pose to you today is a lovely 32-ton truck here, and how many terabytes of printed email data do you think it would take to fill this truck? I give you a couple of seconds to post your comments or your answers in the chat. There isn't going to be a prize, unfortunately. The prize is pride, knowing kind of a pat on your back to know that you've done well. The answer is not quite a terabyte, just almost. Working the assumption of about 150 to 200 kilobytes per message. We estimate it's about 6 to 7 million messages per terabyte of data. And if you kind of then printed that out and you assumed one page per email, very, very generous, you'd end up with about 31,999 kilograms, or just shy of 32 tons. Imagine that you can fit a truckload of data on a 1 terabyte pen drive you carry around in your pocket. Well, a little bit about me, I guess. Quick introduction to who I am. So I'm Johan Dreyer. I've been in the email space for a little while now. In fact, my very first baptism by fire in email was a migration of Microsoft Mail to Exchange Server 5.5. My, those were the days. I then kind of progressed to do my first Office 365 migration from Exchange 2007 and 2010, just as Microsoft launched the platform to replace BPOS. And in the years between that, my entire focus was around core infrastructure, building, designing, migrating, implementing, supporting, troubleshooting Exchange platforms and environments. I've been working with Mimecast products and technologies for at least 12 years now. It started out as me selling Mimecast to customers, helping Mimecast implement, helping customers implement Mimecast and migrate to Mimecast. And then the last 7 or so years, I've been working for Mimecast and still helping customers gain good benefit from it. In the last 7 years, I've been part of the team that stood up our data migration service and platform, and you'll hear a little bit about that in a few minutes' time. Our goals for today, what are we going to do? What are we going to learn? Well, I thought, first of all, it's probably a good idea to take stock right now of, why is now the right time to make a change, to shift data or to move data to the cloud? And why haven't we done this before? So what's stopped us, or what's been the hurdle, the barrier to overcome? Has anything actually changed that makes this more tenable? And if it has, how would we be able to take advantage of that? So hopefully we're going to be able to answer all of these 4 questions as we go through today. As we go along, I'd love for this to be interactive. With the nature of a webinar and the number of delegates means it's not easy to make it interactive, but please do post any questions that you have in the questions section, and we'll have the moderators pose the questions back at the end, or some of the questions back at the end. Let's get straight into it, shall we? So I guess the first thing to think about is, well, why is the time to change now? We've seen a massive shift at Mimecast. We migrate data for our customers, or we have done at least for the last 5 years. And we keep a close eye and watch on where the data comes from. In fact, we can see the major sources of data are all listed out in the pie chart. And 61% of the data we've migrated in the last 12 months comes from an on-premises archive or platform of some sort. And Exchange and Veritas Enterprise Vault are the 2 primary contributors to that. The second largest source of data that we see being migrated into the Mimecast platform is actually from Exchange Online. Now, my theory on that, in fact, the true reason I hear from customers is, with a shift to online services, the security and sanctity of the data becomes more important. In the old days, we used to protect our data centers from the outside world. It was all about protecting our infrastructure. In the new cloud-first world, it's all about protecting the data entity itself or the intellectual property. So having that incumbent data, and that's the Exchange Online part. But the part that we're more interested in today, really, for the purpose of this conversation, is this on-premises section. And to really understand why there's this huge drive and there's this huge shift, it helps for us to take a look back at where we came from. And I'm going to kind of take us back over the last 20 sort of years. If we think about back in 2000, most people worked from an office location. We worked from workstations and desktops connected to a corporate network. Most businesses ran off of a computer room that was built in their building or within their premises. And very, very actively, people were starting to look at moving data centers and infrastructure, or moving infrastructure into a co-located data center space as connectivity became better. Software as a service was kind of starting up, but it wasn't really mainstream yet. And then we're starting to think about how we get people to be more and more remote, but we weren't quite there yet. As we went through the 2000s, it got closer to 2010, cloud really became more mainstream, and that was primarily driven by better infrastructure and connectivity and more reliable and stable connectivity. It was driven by things like smart devices, iOS and Android phones and tablets that were coming out that allowed people to connect and work more remotely and on the move, but also driven by the real kind of maturity of cloud platforms and cloud services. For those who can remember and care to remember, the difference between BPOS and Office 365 is akin to the difference between Exchange 5.5 and Exchange 2007. They were night and day in just how much more capable and productive and designed and fit for purpose they were. And then when we look at where we are now, it's completely transformed. The COVID pandemic has pushed everyone to work remotely or work from home. Offices are pretty much empty for a large part. Corporate infrastructure has been put under pressure. How do you cope with that data center centric capability when everyone's 100% remote? That's pushed and driven the adoption of cloud, accelerated it for those that weren't there yet. But it's also put us in this awkward position where we've got huge volumes of data sitting in a data center somewhere, either in an archive or a historic platform and service, and then a collaboration tool set that sits in the cloud somewhere else that's all kind of accessible and easily accessible from anywhere. And that creates a challenge for the end user. Where's my data? Do I need to connect to VPN? Do I not? Why is this slow and cumbersome where the new services and platforms are efficient and fast? It creates a problem for us as IT folk. How do we manage and maintain both sides? Split backup and recovery scenarios. It's just not a great place to be. And this is where the drive and adoption we see is pushing the data migration to the cloud, and why it's very, very important we pay attention to how we do that and how we do that most efficiently. But why haven't we done this before? Right? This is a question that people keep asking, and I think a lot of us will probably sit here going, oh, that's a pretty easy one. It's because it was really hard to do. Data sits in lots of different sources. We want to move it to a new location. Those are often going to be two different vendors. Often they're going to be competing. They don't want to talk to each other. In fact, they don't have tools that natively help move the data between them. So we've got to engage the services of a third party who's going to help us to do the migration. But most vendors don't want to actually execute the work themselves. So that means we've got to introduce a consultancy and a data migration consultancy. That's complex. There's lots of different parties. There's lots of different kind of levels of service levels. There's blurred levels of accountability. Someone's got to project manage the whole thing, and it just isn't easy to get your head around and to make it work. But let's say we got over that hurdle. Well, what's the next thing that we need to do? Oh, moving data, large volumes of data, just isn't efficient. The way of doing it in the past was a lift and shift method. So you had to literally load up all the data, or get the data out of the cupboard that was stacked in, or get the data out of the environment that it's stacked in, load it up onto an external media of some kind, ship it over to the destination, connect that up, transfer the data off the medium onto the local platform, onto the new platform, and then start the process of churning away at that. That meant that it would take potentially months, if not years, to migrate the data, given the volumes that you've got. And we don't have the LAN infrastructure, the flexibility of LAN and gigabit Ethernet and those kinds of things that you, or fiber channel that you would have had in the good old data center world to be able to do it. So the whole time point just made it unattractive. And lastly, and probably most significantly, I can almost hear people nodding here, is the sheer cost of it. Very few people that I met when I was doing, when kind of doing or when we first started on the data migration process, were prepared for the level of investment that was required to really move their data. You know, there'd be the cost of exporting the data or paying for the tool to export the data. There'd be the cost of the people to actually do the work for you or help you with the consultancy services. A lot of the vendors or recipient platforms would charge for the data or for a fee to invest. Customers are being asked to foot the bill for temporary systems, and all the while this migration is going on, the old platform and the new platform have to run in parallel. So there's an essence or an element of double billing there. All of these things stacked up make it really, really challenging for us to go to the business or to go to our businesses and our financial directors or CIOs and say, could you please sign this project off? It often just becomes a hang on a second, let's just park this. In reality, moving data is complex, time consuming, and really, really expensive. And that's meant that despite all of our best intentions, we've just not been able to get these projects off the ground. Times are actually changing though. They definitely are. And the reason they're changing is that we've got to get better and we've got to get more efficient at the way that we do things. The days of loading up lots and lots of external storage volumes and shipping them and trying to get them through security clearance and scanning and then connecting and loading and unloading the data or transferring on and off the data and then processing it, those have to go. But we cannot keep working this way. It's just not going to support any of us. We realized that as Mimecast, and therefore we went out a few years ago to market and looked for some of the really innovative data migration startups and looked for someone that we could acquire and integrate. Our goal was really to try and find a way to streamline and simplify the process end to end, to bring it in-house so we could introduce a sense of accountability and a one-stop shop, a single point of contact to help you go from source to destination, from start to finish, to end of the journey. And it's taken us a little while to get there, but we've done that. We've got the Simply Migrate tools integrated and developed and built in such a way that now you can actually connect your source, your data source environment directly to your Mimecast cloud. And using the Simply Migrate tools, process data in real time over the internet from the source to the destination. The platform and the infrastructure can be stood up in your data center for now, and in the future we're looking at developments to be able to stand up the temporary infrastructure in Azure, giving you even more flexibility and utility compute. More importantly, you actually have a model now, or a model whereby as something comes out, it gets passed over to Mimecast and gets written. And that confirmation and affirmation happens, which maintains a true chain of custody and real-time reporting. Really, really powerful stuff where you're not comparing Excel sheets from the source to the migration tool, to the ingestion tool or transfer tool, and trying to figure out, well, hang on, how do I reconcile this across the board? Effectively, what we're trying to do is create a direct data stream pipeline, or enabling a direct data stream pipeline, bypassing the good old truckloads that we saw in the initial analogy, from the source to the destination for your data to flow through and be efficient. Does this work though? I mean, it sounds fantastic. I bet a lot of you are kind of going, well, this sounds brilliant, but does it really work? The internet's not a great model or tool for data streaming and for the transfer of data. Let's take a use case, an example. We had a customer I was working with about 6-7 months ago, and they had a project which they had about 17 terabytes of data, and it had been going on for a little while, and we've been working with them through the traditional approach where we're using the lift and shift method. So systems put in the data center, ship hard drives in and out, transfer onto the hard drive, ship it across, all that sort of stuff. And the challenge that we kept coming across is, well, as quickly as you can get the data out, you can only ship a hard drive to the destination data center and to the destination system once it's full, because the time that it takes to get through clearing the security checks and then transferring the data off there means that a quarter or a half a hard drive just doesn't make sense, which means your batches have to be correct. And that meant that, plus the time it takes to export, transfer, ship, transfer back off, and import, adds a lot of overhead to the timelines. And then kind of what we're seeing is the project was going to take us about 6 to 12 months to complete at best. We shifted this early into the Simply Migrate platform and created that data stream. And what that allowed us to do is quite a few things. First off is it removed a lot of the redundant transfer transactions that were happening. It removed the dependency on having to wait for a full disk to ship that disk, or a full shipment of disks to be able to move those across. It meant that the customer is able to prioritize the types of data and volumes of data they wanted to. And as a result of all of these things, as well as being able to retry volumes that were failing or data sets that were failing, the timeline dropped dramatically to about 12 to 18 weeks to complete the project. I'm not going to say that this is going to happen every single time, but these are the sorts of efficiency gains that you get when you have that real-time transfer, that export, transfer, commit, acknowledge, retry kind of a capability built in, running 24/7. So let's recap on the reasons we avoid data migration. Well, complexity. I think we can safely say we've solved for the complexity. We've taken away lots of steps and given that simple drive from start to finish, that connected experience that's managed by a single entity. By taking away that complexity and all the steps in the middle, we've also reduced the time that it takes to migrate your data from years to months, and from months to weeks potentially. That still doesn't answer the one big point, right? How do we go back to our customers? How do we go back to our vendors? How do we go back to our board and say, we want this for cheaper? We've got this for cheaper. By cutting out a lot of the extra steps, the cost of migrating has dropped drastically. In fact, by not having to run the two systems in parallel for potentially years on end, again, the costs have dropped even further. I'd estimate that, based on the quotes that we used to send out several years ago to the quotes that we're sending out today, those costs have probably gone down by a third, maybe even more than a third, just on the actual migration piece. But that's not it. Working with Bytes and working with our partners, we're also able to offer up to 30 terabytes of free data migration services as a current promotional item. And this is something that we're very, very serious about, and we want to support you guys on and help you to make that transition to the cloud and remove those shackles or the old kind of boundaries of the data center. So do get in touch with us and let us know. The thing is, though, it's not as straightforward as I've just made it all sound to be. It would be amazing if it was. We do have the skills and expertise to help you make it straightforward, though, and would like to work with you on that path and on that journey. We've come together with Bytes and we've set up a simple 3-step process that will help you understand and evaluate what your current data estate looks like, how you work with your data and your archive, and where you'd like to get to or get this through to in the future. We'll spend the time with you in virtual sessions as consultants, and once we're allowed to kind of come back on site, we'll be willing to commit the time to work with you on site to understand and really unpick what this could look like for you and your organization. Once we've got a true sense of how this could, or how we could help you, we'd then also engage with some consultants to review the technical, or from a technical perspective, well, what's required to make the current to future transition a reality. What are your data sources? What's the overall health state and of the current platforms that you have? How much data do you have of what type? And how long is it going to take, and what's required to be able to move that information to the cloud? We'll review all of that together with you, and then go away and pull together a document that will document the transition process, and bring back to you a complete migration plan that'll talk you through the steps required and the process and the timeline to move your data from where it is today and transition into the cloud tomorrow, and give you full advantage of the platform. And that's where the call to action comes in, right? Is before I hand back to Mark, we'd like to help you. We've got teams that are ready to engage and run the analysis section with you. The analysis is completely free of charge, and would welcome the opportunity to help and support you understand where you are today and what the journey and path could look like to get to where you'd like to be in the future. All we need you to do or take advantage of that is get in touch with your account manager at Bytes and ask them to schedule in a call. I'm going to pause there and hand back to Mark for the question and answer section.
Perfect. Thank you, Johan. Hopefully you can now all see my screen, and hopefully that was very useful. It was a good insight into, I guess, where data is now and ultimately where it's going. And I think that 3-step plan really takes away some of the challenges to streamline the process and really simplify things. So as we said at the start, there is a questions box on the right-hand side. If you've got any questions or anything you'd like to know, please do pop them in there. Alternatively, if you would prefer to submit the questions outside of this, then please do use the tellmemore@bytes.co.uk address, and we'll happily come back to you off the back of that. So, and we have had a couple of questions, Johan. The first one is, we currently use a product from Veritas, and they use a stubbing-based solution within the user mailbox. What does Mimecast do, or does it offer the same functionality?
Brilliant. Yes, so in simple terms, we can help you with that stubbing, or we can still help you migrate or switch the stubbing process over. There's a couple of different ways of doing that, either transitioning to a clean cut environment where you do away with stubs completely, or getting into a scenario whereby we can actually repopulate mailboxes and restub them once the migration is completed. The best way to really understand how and where we can help you is to go through the workshop process. It's something we've done over and over and over again for our customers. Which approach is right for you is kind of quite specific and unique to the environment and scenario of the organization itself.
Perfect, thank you. And another question, how would you manage the end user change from the current solution to using Mimecast?
I think probably first and foremost is lots of communications, and again, we're very, very adept at handling this for customers, letting people know that there's a change coming, helping them understand what that change looks like, and we've worked with customers on looking at how their workflow, or what the workflow looks like today, and how that could transition, and then helping kind of communicate step by step what's going to change when and how. But then also making sure that you've got both environments fully prepared before you start in kind of proposing that change to the users, and providing the reassurance that that the information is all there. I think probably the biggest concern that we've always seen from end users is, what happens if you lose my data? What happens if something goes missing? And being able to provide that reassurance throughout the entire process, but with validation, is quite key to the transition.
Perfect. A couple more. Can Can you purchase Mimecast archiving as a standalone, or does it require a gateway?
Absolutely, yes, you can. So the Mimecast archive can be purchased as a standalone product for both journal or compliance-based archiving, as well as end user access. And one of the key things that we're really proud of is for the last 7 years running, we've been a leader in the Gartner Enterprise Information Archiving Magic Quadrant, which is a testament to the time and investment and energy that we've put into developing a great product, but also the faith and the trust that our customers like yourselves put into us to look after your data.
Perfect. And last one, within our current solution, there are different options around having email as a pull box. So basically, it seems like email just in one place, or an option to replicate the end user's mailbox. Can Mimecast offer the same thing?
Yes, absolutely. So as I think I touched on before, one side is the compliance, so a journal for e-discovery and making sure that you comply with regulation and can find information that you need efficiently and quickly should the need or should you be called upon to do so. The second element is ensuring that you've got the ability to, or users have the ability to work with a extended retention period of their mail items. But also be able to recover items that they may either on purpose or accidentally deleted because they didn't think they needed it at the time, or they'd need it again. So both models work. Something that we probably haven't touched on is Mimecast have introduced a mailbox recovery capability for customers who are archiving with us and have the additional enhancements turned on or are licensed for it, wherein administrators are able to restore individual items, entire folders or entire mailboxes directly from the archive to either Exchange server on premises or Office 365. So really taking it to the next level when it comes to the usefulness and flexibility of the archive platform.
Perfect. And that's all of the questions so far. So unless there are any more questions, I think we can finish there. Again, if I could just ask that you please do fill out the feedback forms. But thank you, Johan. It's very, very good, very, very useful. I hope everybody found it as useful as I did. And thank you all for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.